Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Moss Show. We're always talking about the decentralized revolution, how the world is changing as we look at it through the lens of politics, finance, and technology. Of course, that technology being Bitcoin, that decentralized technology that is always changing the world. You know, I like to bring you some education, some breaking news so you know what's going on, and some interesting guests. And that's what I have to do today. I'm sitting down with Spike Cohen. He's returning back to the show. Spike was a 2020 vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. So I wanted to dig into a little bit of politics, a little bit of technology with Bitcoin, and talk about what the heck just happened in Argentina. Spike, thanks so much for joining me today.
I'm happy to be on, man. Thanks for having me on again.
Man, I got to say just real quick too. We both spoke at the Freedom Fest in Memphis this year. Listening to your talk, that was really cool, man. You really laid it out. I like that. So I just wanted to say congrats on that.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
The conference. I would like to see it a little bit better. I'd like to see more people there for freedom, but unfortunately, you know, it is kind of is what it is, I guess. But I want to talk about what just happened in Argentina, Spike, and I want to get your opinion on this because I saw something that I didn't think we would ever see. And what am I talking about? Probably like you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, democracy is sort of a scam, right? A tyranny of the minority by the majority, mob rule. And
Yeah.
I've thought that once more than half of the population has found out they can vote themselves more money, they will always vote themselves more money. I thought that's how it always be. And yet here we have a democracy, whatever, voted themselves to basically cut the government down and probably end a lot of entitlements for themselves. I was shocked to see that. What was your thought on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, Javier Milei, I think, can only happen. An election of a candidate like that can only happen when people see the consequences of voting themselves a bunch of free stuff. Let's get some perspective here on just how bad things are in Argentina right now. Their official inflation rate is 150%, between 125 and 150%. That's the official one. It's actually probably double that, and has been that way for several years now. The Argentine peso is essentially worthless. The official exchange rate is 350 pesos to the US to $1 but it's actually much higher than that. And it's as a direct result of both so-called left-wing and so-called right-wing governments, Peronista governments and conservative governments and socialist governments who get into office and spend more than the last group of government that was in before them. And that all came to a head in 2019 when they had their market, they had a market collapse, and the government responded by spending by almost an order of magnitude more than they had ever spent before, while also introducing capital controls to try to control the value of the Argentine peso. And we saw what happened as a result of that. Now, you know, the prices are more than doubling every year, roughly tripling every year. Their economy is completely in the toilet. And then here shows up one of their legislators saying, I'm going to eliminate all of this. And not only that, but he correctly blamed it on the political caste, on the politicians who were robbing them blind with their own money and causing the economic ruin they were in. And by a pretty decidable margin, he beat Sergio Massa, who, by the way, was the economic minister during most of this nonsense that's been going on. So this was not just an election of a libertarian by one of the largest percentages of the voting public in Argentina, but a complete repudiation of the economic policy that led up to this.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting who he beat and how he was responsible for the economy. And yet, you know, they're like, hey, we don't want that anymore. So is it sort of, I guess, what you're saying and sort of what shocked me, it's sort of like you have to hit rock bottom before you want to go the other way. Like your friend that's an alcoholic or drug addict and they don't want rehab. And so these people since the 40s, really, so over 60 years have been voting for more and more and more. And they finally just realized, okay, like it's not working. We have to go, we've hit rock bottom. We have to go the opposite way.
I hope that we don't have to hit rock bottom, but it certainly helped.
Yeah.
It was certainly I'm not sure that a Javier Milei could have been elected 10 years ago in Argentina, maybe 5 years ago, but he certainly was able to get elected because they have hit pretty darn close to rock bottom. I think there are many lessons we can learn here in the States and across the country, across the planet, on how libertarianism can be presented. The reality is, Milei does not pull punches. He does not try to couch libertarianism in relatable terms or anything like that. He's very upfront about the fact that the current political system is an act of robbery by a political caste that seeks to rob everyone blind and benefit from it. And he's going to completely undo all of that. He talks about how socialism is a failure, a representation of failure on every front, not just economically, but socially, culturally, and in every aesthetically, even, he says, in every way. He talks about the fact that Bitcoin is really the return of money back to its actual originators, which was the private sector. This is a man who in no way tries to water down or pander in his messaging, and the public connected with it. So even if that message couldn't necessarily win in other countries or in the U.S., it certainly connects far more than someone trying to present libertarianism as, the best part of being a Republican and the best part of being a Democrat. It's none of that. It is a complete stark change that is necessary and needed, and the public bought it in Argentina.
Let's talk about the messaging for a minute. One thing I'm kind of known for is talking about these cycles and sort of how these pendulums swing back and forth, and human nature takes things too far and then they go back the other way, right? That's sort of how it works. And so, we're at this age right now of like the millennials and the snowflakes and now the wokeism and all of that's going on. But yet we're sort of seeing the Andrew Tates and the Jordan Petersons sort of rise, dramatically rise, being the strong opposition to that, if you will, right? Stand up, pull yourself by your bootstraps, so to speak. Donald Trump sort of embodied that, so to speak, very brash, kind of crude, just said kind of whatever, the big bully, sort of like what Milei is doing as well. And what's interesting is in a time of snowflakes and wokeism and stuff, you would think that the stuff Milei is saying, such as calling these politicians parasites, he calls them, right? You would think that that's not socially acceptable. And today people are too weak and frail to deal with that. But again, back with the Tates or the Jordan Petersons or the Trumps, and now Miele's, do you think, back to your point, the messaging, that this is sort of the messaging that people want, and the media is trying to suppress it and pretend that we don't, but really this is what we need right now? Is that the pendulum
Yeah,
starting to swing back?
I think this is demonstrating that political correctness or wokeism or whatever you want to call it has always been a paper tiger. It has always only been powerful if their accusations against you and their name calling against you if you don't do what they're telling you to do, if they actually affect you. If you're scared of being called a bigot or a racist or a such and such phobe, if you don't accept their narrative as it's not just their current narrative, but its ever changing narrative. And what's happening is people are demonstrating, even in the comedy world, you have people like Joe Rogan and Dave Chappelle who just flat out told them, I don't care what you say about me or what you call me. This is what, the people want to hear. And the reality is, I think the vast majority of people think the same way they did 20 or 30 years ago. And we're seeing now that this was all like largely a corporate media and government driven campaign to try to cow us into fear against saying the truth.
Yeah. I think the other thing, and something that I've been worrying about for a long time, or kind of paying attention to from the political standpoint, is I hate using labels, man, but unfortunately this is sort of what we have to talk about. But one side of the aisle, the left side of the aisle, if you will, seems to always be on the offense, and then maybe the conservative side, I guess, because they're trying to conserve, has always been sort of on their heels. And you can't win from a defensive position. And so that's if you're boxing or whatever, that's a strategy. Let me put my opponent on their heels, so to speak, right? And so the conservatives, the Republicans, the right, whatever, has always been in this sort of cowering posture and just trying to defend a never-ending barrage of attacks. And maybe this Milei, going back to the messaging, is taking the fight back to them. No, you're the ones stealing the money. You're the ones that are the parasites. Yep. Your policies are the ones that have caused this. And it's sort of gone from that defensive position to a more offensive position. All this talk about turning around the economies and going back to a sound money standard makes me understand why exactly gold is taking off. As a matter of fact, just this week, gold broke that $2,000 barrier again. It is ready to take off, which is why I'm putting gold and silver into my portfolio, and you might want to as well. I work with a company called Universal Coin and Bullion. I've been working with them for a while because yes, they have great prices, which of course we all want, but more importantly, they're trustworthy. I've been working with Dr. Mike Fulgens and his company, Universal Coin and Bullion, and they've been working with the Texas State Attorney General on helping to fight fraud in gold. Yes, it's a problem. And they have a very special offer for my listeners. You can get a silver 1 ounce American Silver Eagle coin with no dealer markup at just $27 each with a limit of 3. And they'll even send it to you for free and give you an award-winning gold investment guide if you mention my name, Mark Moss. Just give them a call called Universal Coin and Bullion to get this $27 Silver Eagle coin deal today, or any other gold products that you want at great prices. All right, give them a call, 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Again, 1-800-UCB-GOLD, or you can go online to universalcoin.com/Mark Moss. Maybe, Italy, we got Maloney down there, we have in Hungary, there's some pushback. Poland is sort of on this battleground. But even in nations like France and Germany, we're seeing sort of this swing back. Obviously, what's happened down here in Argentina, El Salvador is a great example. Do you think is that the pendulum starting to swing back, or are we just being too hopeful there?
I think there's always this pendulum swinging back and forth, and it starts as with all things at the cultural and social level, and it works its way downstream to politics. The problem is we see it here in the States. What happens is when that pendulum swings back, and you had kind of talked about this previously, when we go from progressives to conservatives, the conservatives, and I think it was Michael Malice who first said it, conservatives are basically progressives going the speed limit. Or they're preserving what progressives fought to win, say, 10 years prior. And so when the progressives get replaced with conservatives, and the conservatives do little to nothing to actually change things and are really fighting this constant defensive battle, well, then and nothing really improves as a result, it swings back to progressives. This is where libertarians can not just win, but actually change things, because we aren't trying to preserve the progressives' gains from 5 or 10 years ago. We aren't trying to go the speed limit. We recognize that this entire thing, and this is what Milei is saying, this entire thing is a scam. You have a relative handful of people who are controlling everything from the top and robbing everyone blind to benefit themselves through inflation, through taxation, through overregulation, and all of that. And he seeks, and we seek as libertarians, to completely get rid of all of that, or at least to massively reduce it. And that is not only a winning message, but when we actually do it, then I think the pendulum actually swings further in our direction towards people recognizing that was always the best way forward, and that they need to reject all of the statism from the left or the right.
Yeah, that's where these labels start to get really messy, which is why I hate to use them. The definitions have gotten so messed up these days. But, I think of conservatives as like, if they're trying to conserve the principles of the Constitution, like that might be something libertarians would get in line with, right?
Yep.
So that would be good. Let's conserve the Constitution as it was written, not in their living document type of way, as opposed to, hey, let's conserve, like to your point, what the progressives have put forward like a decade ago. So I think maybe that's more in line, and that's where these labels start to get sort of mixed up. What about the Independent Party? So RFK now has jumped on the Independent Party. How does the Independent Party and the Libertarian Party sort of work together or coexist, or differences there?
Well, I think anyone who's not a Republican or Democrat, even if you have an example like the Green Party, where there are things where we are polar opposites, we can at least work together on things like ballot access. See, one of the reasons that Javier Milei was able to actually become president was because first he was able to get elected to the legislature. And the only reason he was able to get elected to the legislature is because in Argentina, they have open ballot access. They also have proportional voting. He got elected to the legislature with just over 17% of the vote. And it was from that elected position that he was able to build his brand and to demonstrate what it was he was trying to, promote as a libertarian. It was from that position. So I think that there are many things that libertarians, independents, Green Party, Constitution, Reform Party, every other party can work together on to try to break the stranglehold that Republicans and Democrats have on the voting system. And to be clear, it's disenfranchisement. From their own perspective, from the statist perspective on voting rights, it's disenfranchisement. If you are telling someone that they really only have two choices, and you use the power of government to all but force off every other option from even being on the ballot, by their own definition, that's disenfranchisement. And we should be fighting against that. We can certainly work together to do so.
I was in Amsterdam a month or two ago. I spoke at the Bitcoin Amsterdam conference, and I was talking to a taxi cab there, and he was explaining how their government in Holland or in um, I don't know. I grew up calling it Holland. They're like, no, you can't call it Holland. It's not Holland. It's
The
eh,
Netherlands,
the
yeah.
Netherlands. Yeah, Holland is just a city, right? That's a city. It's not the country. It's the Netherlands. Anyway, he's talking about how the political party is very, I guess, decentralized, if you will, because every time
Yeah.
somebody leaves one party, they go create another party. And he says, he thinks, or maybe some of the people there think that there's too many parties, and so they can't ever get enough of the vote. And maybe you're only getting 15% of the population, populist vote, but yet it's the majority. I mean, do you think it gets too decentralized at some point like that?
I think it depends entirely on how you're I mean, there's so many different factors. There's what kind of voting system you're using. There's how your legislature is made up. And then there's the real politic reality of coalition building and all of that stuff. But generally speaking, I would much rather have it where politicians are having to cobble together some kind of coalition of the various parties than to basically have a two-headed uniparty that, when it comes to things like ever increasing debt, ever increasing growth of the military industrial complex, ever increasing growth of the administrative state, ever increasing taxation and theft. I would much rather have, if the other extreme is that those politicians, when they get elected, are now figuring out how to cobble together a majority, I'd much rather have that extreme. But I think that we don't necessarily have to have either extreme. I think that you can still have state-based electoral systems, which is what we need to have. We can't have a national one. We shouldn't have a national one. We're 50 nation states that are confederated together. But I think that you should also be able to have enough really just open access to the ballot and to stop funding campaigns. So Republicans and Democrats get hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to fund their campaigns, their conventions, their primaries, and everything else, while the rest of us not only don't get any of that, nor do we want it, but we have to actually spend our own money to fight in court to even be able to be on the ballot. All of that needs to end. The restrictions to ballot access and the taxpayer funding of campaigns, just eliminating those two things would do so much towards allowing non-Republicrats to actually be able to win elections.
Yeah, talk about ballot access. I was in Texas this last week in Texas Blockchain Association, and there was a bunch of politicians there. Senator Loomis from Wyoming was there. And I woke up in the morning, and I see the headline that in Wyoming, they're trying to remove Trump and Loomis from the ballot. And I went and I said, hey, I just saw this morning, they're trying to move you from the ballot. She's like, well, I guess I'm doing something right. But talk about I mean, you're trying to literally remove the leading presidential candidate or a senator from your own state from the ballot. Yeah. And that's somehow a protection of a democracy. I mean, it's just insane the way they're doing this. I want to talk. I want to talk more about some of the strategies. I listened to Dr. James Lindsay, talking about some strategies that was really good. I want to run that by you, sort of the scam of politics, if you will. So I want to run that by you and see what you think about that. And I want to talk more about how they were able to get Milei elected, counting votes by hand in a single night. I think it was pretty big. And then I talk about Bitcoin. I want to talk about this sort of the scam of politics. And this is kind of the way that I've been starting to think about it. And it was really listening to a Jordan Peterson interview with his daughter a month or two ago that got me kind of changing my mind on this, and you're hitting on it. The scam of politics, sort of like a magic trick. Hey, look over there while we do this to you here. And you mentioned earlier that we're a confederate of states. We're a republic, if you can keep it, right? And so 50 independent states. And so in that, the whole nation is caught up in this presidential election. And we have been since I was a kid. I remember being in elementary school, asking me who I wanted to be president, right? We're always watching this presidential election, and none of that matters. What matters is right in front of our face, and we're not even paying attention. My city council matters. My county supervisor matters, or however that's structured in your state. My sheriff, my DA, my governor, those matter to me. And we're all being, misdirected. And James Lindsay was talking about, he had this really good video. I'm going to find it. I'll put it in the show notes for everybody listening down below. But he talked about a plan to beat the left. And he talked about how the left sort of infiltrated the Democratic Party, the squad, and how they kind of came in. And he said, we can basically take that and build out our own plan. And he said, start with your local politics. Can you just get one or two? Because the Republican Party has been taken over by the rhinos, and you can fill in Libertarian Party or whatever you want. But like in my county, for example, could we just get one or two Republican seats? And then could we force the other Republican seats to then get rid of the rhinos and go with us? And then could we get enough of them in our district? And then could we go to the state level? But he talked about starting at the lowest level. And then if you win there, then people see that see that you're winning. They see that movement, and then they can start to rally behind that. And then it builds, and then I get the next level. The next thing you know, we take over the state. And then if we can take over the state, then we take over coalition states. And I was like, man, that is a dang good idea. Because what happens is, let's focus on the president, and then we don't get it, and then everyone's defeated, and then, oh, why bother? It doesn't even matter. As opposed to setting, and this is just like goal setting 101, right? Like set a realistic goal in front of you, achieve that, and then move up. And I thought it was just genius the way that he broke that down. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's just about verbatim what I've been saying within the Libertarian Party for quite some time. There's one thing that the Libertarian Party nationwide is known for: not winning elections. But the reality is,
what Vivek said, right? A party of losers.
Well, but the thing is, we've actually, almost despite ourselves, we've won hundreds of elections, but they're all local elections. But because we also focus on our presidential candidates and our Senate candidates and our gubernatorial candidates and congressional and candidates and so forth, we're seen as the loser party, even though we've been winning elections. And not only have we been winning those local elections, but there's a benefit of it as a result. The people there are happier. They're being taxed less. The services that are being provided are better and far less expensive. And we're able to show what libertarian governance actually looks like. And it's at a fraction of the cost that we spend to lose. So, and long before the vast majority of people ever consider voting for a libertarian for the White House or for their governor's mansion or for Congress or anything else, they need to see how it works in their backyard, which, by the way, is our backyard. And you are far more likely to be to suffer under the tyranny of, on a day-to-day basis, of your city council or your county council or your local sheriff or police department than you are to suffer from anything at the federal level, right? Yeah. So it not only does the most acute, immediate good, it not only is the best use of your resources, and it not only builds up your stable of elected officials who can eventually work their way up to the state and federal level, but it also kills the whole narrative that we can't win and replaces it with, not only can we win, not only can they win, but when they win, when libertarians win, we all win. It's not just if Team Red or Team Blue won, but America actually won because we're freer and benefiting from that freedom. So no, I am a huge fan of the focus on local, especially for the Libertarian Party and other, so-called third parties. That's where we can win and where we can build up from.
What about, though, like kind of one of the points he was making was that you have these two apparatuses. You have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, right? That's what they are. Yep. The Democratic Party has, seemingly kind of been taken over by this radical left, whatever you want to call them, socialist. I mean, they are, right? I mean, you look at the squad, what they're doing, Bernie Sanders. I mean, they're socialists. They didn't start a socialist party. They took over the Democrat Party. Yeah. And so using that, couldn't the Libertarian Party take over the Republican Party, right? And when I say that, I mean the apparatus, right? So you have, there's, the Freedom Caucus guys are probably more in line with the Libertarian, more or less, right? As opposed to the rhinos anyway, right? And so like, could the Libertarian Party start to infect the apparatus that's already there from a local level and starting to kind of get these rhinos out that don't agree with that, smaller government, less taxation, those types of things, and then sort of use the tool that's there, sort of like the left has used, as opposed to trying to get this third party, this Libertarian Party, and then to your point, suing to get on ballots and all those things. Would it be easier just to sort of infect and take the apparatus over, just like we saw happen on the left?
There are many libertarians who are doing that. And to those who do that, I say Godspeed. I would very much like a more libertarian Republican Party, and for that matter, a more libertarian Democrat Party, if that's even, I'm not sure that's even possible. But I certainly, anyone who wants to focus their efforts on that. Also, I'm not sure you have to choose between the two. The reality is, one of the best ways to keep the Republican Party as libertarian as possible is the very real threat that they will lose votes to a libertarian candidate if they don't, if they don't deliver. And so I think that you can have both. You can have libertarians who are trying to make the Republican Party more Republican or more Democrat. And you can also have libertarians who, in order to grow that party and help the Republican Party become more libertarian, give them that ever-present threat of losing their votes to the Libertarian Party as a result of it. I will say, and we saw this with Ron Paul, we've seen it with other libertarians who are Republican. I do think that there is a ceiling that libertarians can reach in either of the major parties, and here's why, and why it didn't do the same for the socialists. The socialists and the status quo uniparty that runs the country both want a bigger government. They just argue over how much bigger and what that would look like, but they both want bigger and bigger government that is more and more involved in your life. We want the opposite of that. So I think there will always, to some extent, as long as this uniparty or duopoly or whatever you want to call it, as long as that establishment exists, there's always going to be a bit of a ceiling of just how much we can infiltrate, for lack of a better word, in that. But I may be wrong. Maybe if libertarians are able to take over the Republican Party, it will become the libertarian equivalent of what the socialists did in the Democrat Party. And if that's the case of what happens, then that's great. Like I said, I think that there is a ceiling, but I also think that part of that forcing the Republicans to be more libertarian, or the party to be more libertarian, is to have that ever-present threat that if they say they're going to be libertarian and then they don't deliver, they're going to lose votes to the actual Libertarian Party.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, but what I'm saying is back to the labels. I mean, who even knows what these labels are anymore? And so in the Democrat Party, the difference of the true liberals that used to be in the Democrat Party, the RFK liberals, I mean, couldn't be more different than the left, right? Than the extreme left. I mean, they're just different in every way, but they work under the same umbrella of Democrat.
Yeah.
And so you could have a libertarian and I don't even know what a Republican is under the Republican name. The ideologies are different. I understand what you're saying, though, as opposed, like right now, the Republican and Democratic Party both want bigger governments, including socialists want bigger government as well. Socialists want a bigger government apparatus that has more power and control, whereas libertarians want less of it. But unless you get maybe to this extreme example of Argentina, where he's literally starting from zero, like zero-based accounting, like let's just burn it down and rebuild it. It's maybe we have to maybe more whittle it down. And so that maybe is more of like a process. Well, all this talk with Spike talking about this revolution that's coming across, and I am hoping for the best, but we have to be alert and we have to protect our own income and our wealth. If we want to succeed, we need optionality, and money creates those options. Now, if you want to learn how to protect your wealth and build your wealth in 2024, I highly recommend checking out an event my friend Dutch Mendenhall is doing. Dutch Mendenhall is the co-founder and CEO of Rad Diversified, and he's having an event called the Invest Wealth Summit. It's in Tampa, December 1st through the 3rd. He's having Tucker Carlson there, Buck Sexton, and many more. And if you want to learn how to create financial freedom and security for your future, then you need to be at the Invest Wealth Summit. Get your tickets at investwealthsummit.com. You can learn how to diversify your portfolio without relying on Wall Street. Explore alternative investments, gain access to unique opportunities, hidden gems, uncover untapped potential in real estate, startups, and innovative technologies, and more. If you want to learn how to reduce your tax burden and all of that, go down and see Dutch Mendenhall, see Tucker Carlson, see Buck Sexton, and many more. Expand your investment horizons and secure your financial future. You can get your seat right now by going to investwealthsummit.com. Again, investwealthsummit.com, and pick up that ticket. And then if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Mark Moss Show. I've been sitting down with Spike Cohen talking about the revolution in the air that's happening down in Argentina. That's what I got today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get to the money for a minute, Spike. So, the new president there in Argentina is an economist. Some of the legacy media is calling him a right-wing economist. Wherever they get right-wing, whatever attack. He's an Austrian economist, right? So he believes in sound money principles and human action and those types of things. He does want to go to a dollar. He does want to dollarize the country.
Yeah. Yes.
So a lot of people that are, maybe hardcore libertarians or freedom lovers are like, well, wait a minute, he just wants to go on the dollar standard. Isn't that the same thing? But he's also
Yeah.
been pro Bitcoin as well, which of
Yes.
course, why wouldn't he? We have two presidential candidates in the US on a pro Bitcoin platform, but why wouldn't they? Who could run for the land of the free and not say you don't have the freedom to choose what type of money you want? Anyway, so he's running for both. Like I said, there's criticism though that he wants to go the dollarization route. I mean, what's your
Yeah.
take on that?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a matter of perspective. First of all, he has talked about the fact that Bitcoin is the, for lack of a better word, purest form of money. It is the return of money back to the private sector where it belongs. There has been talk about Bitcoin becoming a form of legal tender in Argentina. But I want to be clear about this dollarization thing. The dollar, the inflation rate under the dollar has been, the official rate is what, anywhere from 5 to 8%. It's probably more like 15, 20%. Argentina's peso, their inflation rate, official rate, has been around 150%, and it's probably closer to 2 or even 300% year over year. So if you're comparing two fiat currencies, it's not even comparable that the US dollar, comparably speaking, is far more stable. It's also going to be a lot easier for the economy to say, okay, for the Argentinian government to say, okay, we're going to have to turn off our peso. It's a failed experiment. We destroyed it, and we're going to just replace it with this fiat currency, at least in the interim. That's a more immediately feasible thing than saying, okay, our new official currency that we use for everything is Bitcoin. So I do believe, based on what he has said, and obviously what the advisors that are advising him, all of whom are also Austrian trained, I do think that these steps are introduction of Bitcoin, normalization of Bitcoin, introducing it as a form of legal tender like what they did in El Salvador. But I think an immediate intermediate step to just reduce the absurdly high inflation that is literally killing people in Argentina right now is to switch from their peso, which has gone the way of the Weimar Republic Reichsmarks, to the US dollar, which comparatively speaking is exponentially more stable.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I was saying the same thing. I think it's a really good intermediate step. It's like triage. It like stops the bleeding. Like,
Yeah,
let's just
it's a
get it to
triage.
like
Yeah.
sort of like a inflation like we have in the US, and then we can get to the next step. We have to do something
Yeah.
immediately. And as much as I'd like to see a Bitcoin standard, I mean, I just don't think it's super realistic today. Like, let's just take this first step. I think it's
This
a good
very
step.
moment. Yeah.
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 And then we can see sort of what's happened in El Salvador, where they're on the dollar standard, but now they're bringing Bitcoin in as a reserve currency, or not a reserve currency,
Exactly.
as a medium of exchange. But that's brought in massive amounts of tourism, investment capital, businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, and it is changing that country very rapidly. So I think it's a good intermediary step as well. I've seen some people say, oh, he's probably controlled demolition, controlled opposition. His picture's on the World Economic Forum website. Have you seen that?
I have seen it. So my understanding, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this, my understanding is that his involvement with the WEF, the World Economic Forum, was that in 2014 he was included on a panel of economists from Argentina or from Latin America talking about economics in Latin America. That's the extent to his involvement. My understanding is that they removed his contributions in that from their website. So it seems like they didn't like what he had to say, whatever it was he had to say.
Yeah.
I don't believe, from what I've heard and my understanding, I don't believe he has any other involvement other than, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, they invited him to speak on a panel about Latin American economics. And as a result of that, because he has spoken at one of their events and was a panelist, he has a page on their site, or used to have a page on their site. That's the extent from the research I've done, which I will admit has not been exhaustive. But from what research I've done and what I've seen from others, that's the only thing I've seen, was that he did that panel one time. And again, apparently they didn't like what he had to say, because they scrubbed him they've scrubbed any of what he had to say from their site.
Yeah, I seen the same thing. And the World Economic Forum is putting everybody's picture on their website, and so like just because they put a picture of you on there doesn't mean that you're pushing their policies. And that's what I try to remind people. And I just feel that even if maybe that was the case 10 years ago, anyone that goes on Tucker Carlson and can recite F.A. Hayek from memory, uh, if you have read that enough to have it ingrained enough to be able to recite it by memory, like you believe it, right? You have the
Yeah.
economic side down. So
Yeah, but I want to. This is an important point because let's say he's a WEF puppet and a CIA operative, a plant by the Western establishment. It is crucial whether he is or isn't. It is crucial that as libertarians we hold him to account.
sure,
If he doesn't deliver like he said he would, if he said he was going to do this but does this instead, then we need to be the loudest ones in holding him to account, because the alternative is if he comes in and promises to do all these things and then fails to deliver or does the opposite, then the narrative from the ruling class, from the corporate media, or the global corporate media, and the Western governments around the world is libertarianism failed. And
yeah,
so it is crucial that we be at the forefront of praising him when he does what he said he would do, and criticizing him when he doesn't when he doesn't do what he said he would do or does the opposite of it. So whether he is or is not a WEF puppet or a CIA puppet or whatever else, if he's a true believer or not, it is crucial that we hold him and
yeah,
anyone else that is under our banner even more accountable than we would hold anyone else, because this is, for lack of a better word, our brand. And if
yeah.
he does the wrong thing and it fails and he does it under our brand, then the libertarian brand is going to suffer writ large. So it's important that we hold him accountable.
Yeah. I have about 2 minutes left. I have another question, and I'm not sure if you really have got into it this deep into the economic side, but Argentina does have a trade deficit of about $1 billion. They're about
Yeah.
$400 billion in debt. How do they dollarize with that type of a trade deficit, when they lose the ability to control their own money without taking on even more debt and sinking? Do you think that maybe by stripping all this government bloat, they can unleash economic activity and kind of grow their way out of it? Or have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think that's the plan, is to so strip down government that they can, like you said, grow their way out of it. I think there's also going to be some haggling to try to, and this is where a lot of libertarians are going to get upset. He's going to have to haggle with the IMF. He's going to have to haggle with his creditors, right? Like
Yeah.
he came in and inherited this massive, and I'm not making excuses, but the reality is he is going to have to, he can't simply say, okay, all debt is gone. We have completely, clean slate. This is Argentina day zero.
Yeah,
He's
I
coming
can't.
into a reality that was created before him. And so there's going to have to be haggling. There's going to have to be working these things out. But I do think the overarching plan is to massively reduce government and introduce the kind of pro commerce incentives and pro trade incentives that set the Argentinian economy on fire, and cause massive amounts of growth that will allow them to grow out of this, which will include massive tax reductions. It'll happen.
Yeah. I think that's such a great viewpoint. There's the world that we want to be in, the heaven island, and then there's the world that we're in,
Yes.
hell island, and we have to build a bridge
Yeah.
to get there, right? And so,
Yes.
I mean, the debt is what the debt is. And he's gonna have to work it out. You can't just
Yeah.
magically get past this and back to kind of even this going to the dollar first. It's like this is a
Yeah.
process.
This is a process.
It
Yeah.
didn't get this way overnight. It took 60 years. It's going to take some time to get out of it. Hopefully, if we get out of it at all, or they get out of it, I should say, and then hopefully it spreads to us. Anyway, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Mark Moss Show. I've been talking with Spike Cohen, talking about libertarianism and what's going on down in Argentina. Check him out on Twitter at Real Spike Cohen. Check it out. And anyway, that's what we got. Thanks so much, Spike, for joining me today.
Absolutely, man. I'm always happy to come on.